My friend.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to introduce Good morning. I'd really like to introduce my good friend, Ben Fisher, who's going to come up here. I think you all know what he's going to speak about.
Buen Camino.
Buen Camino.
Does anybody know if there is a food pantry distribution today?
No, there is not.
There is not.
Next week.
Good morning. So what I'm wearing is exactly what I wore day after day after day after day doing the Camino. In fact, literally these clothes. They got worn literally every other day. Now, I'm going to be...
Ben, can you get real close to the mic, Rector?
Maybe we can turn it up a little bit.
Let me try to get.
I have the right to be right on top of it, okay. Yeah, there, all right. Okay, well, the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, it's a pilgrimage. It's one of a number of pilgrimages that people have been walking for many, many years. In fact, it's one of 3 primary Christian pilgrimages to Jerusalem, to Rome, and then to Santiago de Compostela. People have been walking this route for over 1,000 years now. It's a really remarkable history and a remarkable experience. And so I recognize a number of you folks, and in fact, when I first, in 2014, from the first time I walked the Camino, I gave a talk here, and I wonder how many of you may have been in that, or remember being in that men's group. Okay, well, not many. Well, that's good. That means that there won't be a whole bunch of duplication of information that I'm providing today. So I wanted to start with a piece of wisdom that was imparted to me when I finished First Camino by a friend that I knew from the Bay Area who happened to be over there. And he said, well, Ben, how are you going to explain the Camino to people when you get back home? I said, well, I'm not quite sure, Bob. What do you suggest? And he said, you can't. There's no way you can fully explain what the Camino is. You can talk a lot of details and stories and whatnot, but the reality is it is such an experiential event in your life, and so many things are going on spiritually and physically and just everything that's happening that you just cannot fully communicate what it is to somebody who hasn't actually been. So, I don't know if Steve would agree with that, but yeah. So what I'll be talking to you about is a little bit of detail about where it is and how you go about it, and then some stories about different experiences that I had in the course of Caminos. So let me start by showing you a couple of maps, which you can't see real well from there, but nevertheless. So this is France up here, and this is the first part of Spain along the Bay of Biscay. The traditional Camino starts in a little town here. It's southwestern France. You come into Paris and get to Bayonne or to Biarritz and then come down here. And then you start walking. And from this map, you come down to Pamplona, and then Camino Frances heads along to basically west. I've got this map because this only takes us as far as, well, not even quite to Burgos. This map, which is 1 inch equals 6 miles, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port is about here. You come down to Pamplona, this one, and you walk 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 some more, and then you keep walking and you walk and you walk and you walk and you walk and you walk, and about 35 to 40 days later, you arrive in Santiago de Compostela. And then some of us decided we haven't walked enough, and so go out to Murcia and to Finisterre. Finisterre meaning end of the earth, which people back when this was originally named thought that it was. And so that's the Camino Frances. There's also my second route was a French route that was solely in France. So from this map, that started like up here and came down to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And then last time I walked, I did what's called the Norte, and I started doing the Frances, but then started in right here, which is Irun, which is right where France and Spain meet at the Bay of Biscay. And this one walks literally all into you get here, and then it drops down. Actually, go a little further. Yeah, right there, and come down to Santiago. So that's just a brief visual perspective of where it is. Yes.
What are the significance of the town that it starts in and the town that it ends in?
Well, this town that it starts in, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, I can't tell you that much of the history of it, other than it has been for many years sort of considered the traditional starting point. However, realistically, the starting point in the past was your front door. Quite literally, your front door. And not the majority by any stretch, but many people that one would meet who, I remember one time meeting a group of 3 guys from somewhere in northern Germany, and they were walking Camino, and they actually had started from they were high school friends, they had started from their front doors, and they were doing, each year they would do a 2-week stint of walking and then go back home and do jobs, and then the next year they would take transportation to where they had left off and do another 2 weeks, and they were in their, I think, 3rd or 4th year of doing this, and we met them in France, so they hadn't even gotten to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port yet. And the Santiago de Compostela has a history of being a spot where St. James ended up being sent by the Virgin Mary to this part of Spain, it wasn't called Spain back then, to be as a missionary, and he didn't do real well there and ended up going back to Rome. To Rome? I'm not sure. I think it was to Rome, but maybe it was to Jerusalem. And I believe he was one of the first apostolic martyrs, might have been the first. And then about the story goes 600 years later, his bones were discovered back in Spain, where he had previously been, and his bones are, again, are buried at the Cathedral of Santiago de Compostela. And there's actually a wonderful, you walk down into a crypt, and behind some iron bars, there's incredible ossuary and silver, and anyway. So that's the story, and so it has been a place where people have been going for to participate with St. James and his story, and it also, for centuries, was a way in which one could gain an indulgence from the Catholic Church, which would, and I don't know exactly, I don't have this exactly right, but essentially I believe it meant that you could rid yourself of most sins if you would get an indulgence, and if you got to Santiago, and then you would get the indulgence, and if you went back wherever you were from, that was a very important thing. And in fact, people could also walk off certain illegal things or problems that they had gotten into in terms of the law in different countries if you got to Santiago de Compostela. The little problem with that, though, is that when you get there, you're only halfway, because you had to walk all the way back home. And that was a long haul. So, anyway, let's see. Okay, so the Camino Frances, the traditional route, starts in this little town, Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. You go up over the Pyrenees, and then back down, and then, as I said, as I showed you, start walking more or less west, going to Pamplona, and then west from there. A lot of ups and downs, and it's an interesting exercise for your feet, but people make it. So I did that route in 2014, and then in 2016, I went to and did this route called the Podiensis, or the Puy, which starts near Lyon and takes you down to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. And then in 2022, I did what's called the Norte, which was that northern route right along the coast of northern Spain. I walked for 48 days. I had, as I said, I was carrying my backpack. This backpack. This hat. These poles. Literally the clothes I'm wearing right now. And one other set of clothes. So you wear one pair of clothes, you wash them, hang them up to dry, and put your clean ones on, and you wear those the next day, and it just keeps on going. So I walked about 630 miles this last trip. I was staying in albergues, sometimes the pension or a little small hotel, occasionally a monastery, and even one occasion a convent. An albergue is basically a youth hostel, but it's specifically for pilgrims. In fact, you have to have your little pilgrims. You have to have this little thing called the credential that shows that you are a pilgrim. And every place that you stay, you can see on the Amy's diorama back there, you get these little stamps for every place that you stay. And this is what tells the people in the albergues or otherwise that you truly are a pilgrim. and where you have stayed and where you're going. You sleep in a room that has anywhere from 2 pilgrims to literally 75 pilgrims in it, some of which have been around for a long time, and all of which, especially if you've got one, if you're in one that's got the 75 people or even 5 people, of earplugs that have been custom made is absolutely critical. After walking all day, everybody's stuffed up in this dusty place you're sleeping, the choral music coming from everybody is just astounding. But it's all good as long as you are able to sleep through it. So, so what's it like to get started? Well, I had spent a lot of time getting myself prepared to do the Camino my first time. And I had flown over to Charles de Gaulle Airport and taken the train down to Piedmont and then the train to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. I had a place that I was staying that first night. And I had dinner and came back, got to bed, and I could not sleep. I was so angry. It was just crazy. And I finally, at 2:30 in the morning, France time, which was 5:30 in the afternoon here, called my wife Margaret and said, "Sweetheart, I don't know I can do this. This is crazy. How crazy arrogant is it for me to think that I'm going to walk 600 miles. I'm here completely on my own. I don't know anybody. I don't speak Spanish. What's going on?" Spoiler alert. At times I get teary when I'm talking about Camino, and things touch my heart about it. And so I just beg your indulgence because it's prone to happen. Anyway, she's a spiritual attack, but you're prepared. Christ is with you. Just see if you can get 2 or 3 hours of sleep and go, because you'll be okay. So we then prayed, and I did get about 3 hours of sleep, and got up in the morning and put my backpack on, got my sticks, and I started walking. About 30 minutes, I'm walking along, and there's this couple walking, and I tend to walk relatively quickly, and I walk by these folks, and "Hola, buen camino." That's typically what you say is, hello, have a good Camino, good walk, a good way. And I hear this, "Hello." So I slowed down and said, "Oh, well, you sound like Americans." "Oh, yeah." I said, "Oh, well." And so the 3 of us start walking together. And I said, I'm Ben from San Francisco, and they are Bill and Jane from Portland. And that's how typically conversations start on the Camino. And Bill says, "So where in San Francisco do you live?" "Oh, well, I actually don't live in San Francisco." "Oh, well, where do you live?" "Marin?" And I said, "No, I actually live on the other side of the bay, in the East Bay." "Oh, well, where in the East Bay?" "Well, it's sort of like up in the Oakland Hills." "Oh, yeah, where in the Oakland Hills?" "Well, actually, I don't live in Oakland. I actually live in a little town called Piedmont, but nobody knows it." "Oh, no, I know Piedmont. I grew up in Rockridge." "No kidding." And he says to me, "So did you grow up in Piedmont?" "No." "Oh, where did you grow up?" "Berkeley." "Oh, really? In Berkeley?" "Well, we're in Berkeley." This is, I've been walking for a half hour, right? And I said, "Well, the South Side campus." "Oh, yeah? Where on the South Side campus?" I say, all right, I grew up on Derby between Regent and Hillegas. And he says, what's your last name? I said, Fisher. And he goes, yellow house, green shutters, big tree on the left. Your dad still owes me $16.53. I was a newspaper delivery boy for your dad in the late 50s. My response was flabbergasted, but the even more important response was, thank you, Lord. I know I am precisely where I am supposed to be, and I know you got my back.
Did you pay him back?
He said, I was joking about that part. Reaching into my pocket now.
Can you break a 20?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that was literally, for me, a godsend, because it became absolutely clear that truly I was where I needed to be.
On your first day.
Day one, after having this major anxiety attack, spiritual attack, just less than 12 hours earlier. Yeah. So that the providential piece of that is just was amazing. And the thing is, and that's not the only, those sorts of things happen many times. It's staggering. And as my spiritual director, Father Thomas, had said to me, these are not coincidences. This is what we refer to as a divine appointment. And that's a phrase, a divine appointment, that has stuck with me for a long, long time. And it's precisely what it is. Now, okay, why would you want to do a Camino where you are filling up your backpack, you are going to be sleeping with up to 75 other people at night, you're going to be walking sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the sunshine, always needing your sunblock, you're going to be not knowing people. Well, there are a lot of good reasons. And they vary. You know, they vary for everybody. It's typically, not everybody, a lot though, it's very typical that people have had something significant happen in their lives. They've lost a job. They've just graduated from college. They've decided that they've retired. That was me. What else? Somebody has died recently. Or they're just having a tough time. Or some people just want a different experience. And it's a different experience. So I had spent a fair amount of time talking with my spiritual director about journey as life story. And it became clear to me that I was being called to go to the Camino, do the Camino. And my phrase about that, typically, sorry, I just have to, keep jumping back, but typically when you meet some folks, it is this, hola, buen camino, hi, I'm Ben from San Francisco, I'm bum, 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 bum. And then the next question is, why are you walking the Camino? And my answer to that was that I felt called by Christ because he wanted to spend more time with me. And that was why I was walking. That generated some amazing conversations. Usually it started with, well, I'm a really spiritual person, but I'm not religious. And it was like, okay, tell me what that means. And then you delve into it and you have these remarkable conversations with people you've never met, you're likely never going to meet again, yet people are very open to having these conversations. So that was really quite special. The second time I went, the first time I was doing it solo. I mean, Christ was with me the whole way, but I was walking on my own. The second Camino I went with my brother-in-law in France, and then the third trip, this in 22, again I was walking on my own. And the second trip I felt called again by Christ because I wanted to spend more time with him, which was interesting that I then walked with my brother-in-law, who felt that anything more than 15 seconds of silence was way too much. And here I am enjoying my very meditative, prayerful time. And anyway, that created some interesting conversations between the two of us. But ultimately, we resolved it, and we had a way that we dealt with that. But it worked out. And then the third time, I felt that it again called because it was more of a, rather than Christ wanting me or my wanting Christ, it was a mutual thing that we needed to be spending more time with each other. And that may sound sort of strange in terms of even trying to differentiate between them, but for me it was definitely there was in them. The other thing that was really different for me in 2022 is that I was doubly blessed to be able to go, and I also had the honor of carrying and dispersing a bottle of filled with some of the ashes from my spiritual director, Father Thomas, who had died very unexpectedly in 2021, not ever having been able to walk the Camino, which was something that he had deeply wanted to do. So that was particularly important to me. So, getting back to how do you do the Camino? Well, you can walk the Camino. You can ride your bicycle and do the Camino. You can ride a horse and do the Camino. This last trip, there was a couple from Vienna who had their horse. And you occasionally see some people with horses, but it's the exception. And they were alternating riding the horse and leading the horse, but they did the entire Norte route with a horse. Anyway, it was pretty remarkable. So there are multiple ways you can stay in albergues or pensions. You can stay in hotels. You can carry your backpack with everything that you need, with the exception of a bed and your dinner and breakfast. You can have your backpack shipped ahead to the place you're going to spend the next night and carry a day pack. There are lots of alternatives. You can walk in boots. These boots have seen a lot of miles. And fortunately, I like them so much that I bought 3 pairs so that I'm able to continue to wear the same boots. You can do the Camino for 100 kilometers. You start in Sarria. You can do the Camino, as I said before, starting in home. You can do the Camino starting in Saint-Jean. It's incredible the variety that is open to one and the opportunity to find the way that works for you. And many people say, well, the Camino sounds incredible, sounds fascinating. I'd love to do it, but I can't because fill in the blank. And that's when we start talking about, well, but there are alternatives. We know somebody who did their Camino in a wheelchair. We know of a person who did his Camino with his cello on his back and would stop at a church, usually a church, almost every day on the way, and play in the church for a short period of time. There are all sorts of ways to do your Camino. Okay, well, let's see, I'll go past that one. So, but solo, as I'm doing it, does not necessarily mean that you are without companionship. Because one of the things that is so remarkable about Camino is the development, well, there are millions, literally millions and millions and millions of pilgrims who have walked the Camino. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands that do it every single year now. So there are, depending on which route you take, there are typically a fair number of people walking any given route every single day, certainly during the summer and both edges of the summer, not so much in the winter, but however, you meet people early on that become what we call your Camino family. And these are people that if you sort of are going at a similar pace with them, that you will see over and over again. If you have a different pace, then you may not see them so often. But it is very common to develop a relationship with a group of 2, 4, 10 people that you do interact with many days. And you may walk with them or back and forth with them for 5 or 6 days, and then not see them for 4 weeks. And then there they are. And so it's, again, one of the really fun things that happens as this whole process is orchestrated. There's a real rhythm to the Camino, and that's another one of the things that is really fascinating about it and is so life-giving, in that every day is pretty much the same with exceptions. You get up in the morning, you have a little breakfast, which is typically tea for me, coffee for most people, and some toast and maybe an orange. You pack your backpack, put it on your back, you go out the door. You need to be out the door by 8 o'clock in the morning if you're staying at the albergues. Some people are out before dawn because they're comfortable doing that and they want to be early getting into the next albergue, or they're going to have a long day, whatever. Once you started walking, for me, it would liturgical prayers, morning prayer with Father Thomas. I have a recording of him doing it, and I'd start with that, and then have other prayer time, typically the Jesus prayer, and then perhaps some singing or listening to music and walking. Though listening to music as I was walking only really started to happen this last Camino. The first two didn't do much of that. After an hour or two of walking, I'd stop at a cafe, typically stop at a local cafe, have something to eat, walk, perhaps stop again for some lunch, walk some more, maybe talk with some folks for a bit, get an ice cream bar. That was something that happened pretty much every day. And walk some more, arrive at the albergue that you decided you're going to stay at, pay them person at the front your 5 to 10 euros, $5 to $10, get assigned your bed, go over to the bed, put your backpack down, get your soap out and your towel, go take a shower, come back, get the clothes that you've been wearing that day, go outside or inside, depends on where it's set up, wash your clothes by hand, set them out on a line to dry, go back, write in your journal. This was actually a big one. The others I typically took were about half this size, because before you go, and most people weigh every single thing they're taking, and down to the last half ounce, and because you desperately want to eliminate all of the weight that you possibly can, because you're going to be carrying it for a long time. After doing that, then typically you'd have a meal, come back, say compline, the evening prayer, and go to bed. Wake up in the morning and repeat. Day after day, after day, after day, after day, for over anywhere from 35 to 45 days, depending on which route you take. So you become very acclimated to this new rhythm, and in the process, you develop a personal pace, which is a much typically slowed down pace from the crazy frenetic lives we live here, where we're constantly worrying about work, or we're worrying about what needs to be done with family or the grandkids, or taking care of the bills and paying and dealing with a computer that's not working, and fussing with all the emails you're getting, all the stuff that's going on. You're leaving that behind. That stays here. And that is a true blessing, because it means that you have the opportunity to truly be interacting with, interfacing with Christ. Christ as light coming from other people, Christ from you interacting with other people. And those are some of the most amazing blessings. You're interacting with people, other pilgrims who you meet, as I said earlier, you meet them, you have conversation with them, and you may never see them again. In fact, it's likely that you won't have any long-term relationship, yet there is this willingness and openness to have conversations that just simply don't happen when you're walking down the street in Berkeley or San Francisco or the Berkeley Hills or whatever. So you find with pace that you have an opportunity to have slowed down, even if you walk fast, to see the sunrise, to see the sun set in the afternoon. You have time to stop and take the pictures. Take pictures of the jet black slugs, because you want to show your 8-year-old grandkid that picture, or the rabbit holes, or the amazing wind blowing in the trees as you're walking along, or the vistas of the ocean, which is spectacular. And you may meet the people that you've been walking with, people who are from all around the world. I've met people ranging from an 80-year-old fella from Japan to a couple I have met from Israel, a couple from Siberia. I met a bunch of people from Brazil, a woman from off of Australia, Tasmania, which is a pretty random place to be coming from to come do the Camino. Quite a few from the States, from Canada, from Mexico, you name it, everywhere you can imagine in Europe, and all walks of life, all ages. An 80-year-old Japanese fellow. The youngest one that I met is a 2-year-old from Croatia with his mom, who was pushing him in a 3-wheeled stroller along the Camino. And her husband wasn't able to join her until the last 2 days. It was incredible that she was doing it, and the little guy was doing it too. Okay. I'm having to move through some of this. Learning and relearning life lessons, another good reason to be on the Camino. We all know I suspect the ruthlessly eliminate hurry from our lives, Dallas, one of the famous quotes from Dallas Willard. Well, it's a really important lesson to learn, and unfortunately some of us have to relearn it over and over again. And in fact, this last Camino, I almost had to stop my Camino in the middle because I had been hurrying too much when I was walking with a fellow who was 48 years younger than I am, and he walked even faster than I do, but we were walking together, and by the end of the day, when we arrived in Pamplona, I could barely walk. My knee was killing me, my hip was a problem. I called my wife, she's a nurse practitioner, and said, Margaret, what do? I think I've got tendonitis. And she said, no, that's your arthritis. I said, sweetheart, I don't have arthritis. Oh, yes, you do. Come on, Margaret, I don't have arthritis. Yeah, you do. Said, okay, all right, let's say I do. What am I supposed to do about it? She said, well, you need to elevate it, you need to take ibuprofen, you need to ice it, and you need to rest. Okay, how about 3 out of 4? No, 4 out of 4. Well, yeah. So I did have 2 rest days, which meant that I walked less than 10 miles those 2 days. But nevertheless, I did do lots of ibuprofen. I did ice, and I elevated when I could, and then I kept going. But over the course of time, I lost 2 toenails as well that had become very unhappy during that walking too fast also. So life lessons need to continue to relearn them. One of the blessings is starting every day with the Jesus prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior, have mercy upon me, a sinner. And that's something that becomes part of the rhythm and part of the over and over again as one is walking. For me, hugely important. Again, it's one of those things that has been around for centuries and centuries and centuries. And it's really something that we can incorporate into our lives on a regular basis, not just on Camino. Being present to God, handing my fears over to Christ, being attentive. Being attentive was something that's very important to Father Thomas, and it's very important should be to us. Being attentive to Christ, the Holy Spirit, to self, where I'm walking, what the smells are, what the views are, taste of new food, where the fletches are. What's a fletcha? It's a yellow arrow. These are fletches. These are the way that you find your way. If you walked 15 minutes and haven't seen one of these or just a regular arrow in yellow, then you need to turn back because you're not on the right way. And you don't want to keep going on the wrong way because it takes a long time to get where you're going. This is a stylized one that we would frequently see something like this, sometimes on the wall, but also sometimes in the pavement or on these stone markers that were, I don't know, maybe 3 feet high, 2.5 feet high, and 18 inches wide, that would tell you how far you, where you were in terms of kilometers relative to Santiago. And they'd have one of these that then showed you the direction you're supposed to be walking in. So being attentive was a critical component of doing what needed to be done. Remembering step at a time really works. Because if you focus on the fact that you're going to walk 1,325,000 steps, you need to be willing to not just think about how many steps are ahead of you. You gotta be willing to stop, turn around, look back. Oh, you know what? Off in the distance, I came down that mountainside, that hill there, down and walked across there. Oh yeah, and there's the river I went across, and now I'm back up, come all the way across the fields, and now I'm back up here. Isn't this incredible and wonderful? You've got to stop and look and see what you've done as well, rather than just focusing on the challenges that are continuing to be ahead of you, because there will be challenges. It's a long ways. So one of the things that there was one day, this last trip, where I was going up a really seriously steep hill. I was short of breath. Once again, I was with younger people. About four, I think 3 German guys and a German woman, and they were just going up this really steep thing, and I was naturally trying to keep up with them. And just telling them, feeling sorry for myself and wondering, why am I putting myself through this? It's so demanding physically and emotionally. But then I realized that this last Camino, God was using me to bless others. And I needed to really recognize that and understand it. And I'm going to give you an example. So early on, I met Sylvia, a German woman, young German woman, about, I think she was in her early 30s. She and I, turned out, were spending the night in the same room in this albergue, in a little rural albergue. And we had been talking about how things were going, and she was telling me, we were chatting, she was limping a little bit, and she had a sore knee and hip and knees. And I was talking about my sore knees, and nothing profound, but just general conversation. And then the group of bicyclists came in, and we were all, I don't know, there were 8 of us, I guess, in the room that night. And I saw her, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times over this, and then I lost track of her, hadn't seen her again. And that's pretty typical. About 4 weeks later, literally 2 days from Santiago, I'm out middle of the morning, having stopped at a cafe, and I'm having my tea and talking to another person. And there's Sylvia running down the street, coming over, and I get up to greet her, and a huge hug. And I said, oh, and Sylvia, this is Cordoba. And Sylvia turns and says to this other person, I wouldn't be here but for this man. I'm going, Sylvia, what are you talking about? And she said, remember when we first met? I said, yeah, the little albergue, and your hip was bothering you, and my knee was bothering me, and yeah. She said, before you arrived there, I had already given up. I had checked the train schedule, and I had a ticket to go back to Germany the next morning. But because of the conversation that we had, and your encouragement of me, and the fact that you were continuing, even though you had your bad knee and were suffering, I decided that I would just continue, keep going, and try. And now I'm 2 days from arriving in Santiago. I was totally blown away, because I had no idea that she was going through that level of challenge, and here we were. She was now going to have the opportunity to complete her dream. So another divine appointment. One morning, about 2 hours after I'd gotten up and left the albergue, I was been up on a hill and coming down the hill into this little town called Laredo. And seated off on the side of it, this high curb, with this young woman. She had a stroller, an empty stroller next to her, and she was just sobbing, just absolutely sobbing. And I walked past her, and 10 feet later did a U-turn and came right back and asked her if there was anything I could do to help her. And I got a response in Spanish, which I don't speak at all, and said, "I am so sorry, but I don't speak." She replied to me in broken English, but enough that I could understand. And it turned out that she was a young mom She had just dropped off her daughter, her 5-month-old daughter, for the very, very first time, and she was heartbroken. And she was sitting on the side of the road, heartbroken. So we talked about it. I talked a little bit, and I told her how tough I knew that was. I had two granddaughters whose mothers had been going through exactly the same thing just a month or two before I left. And how hard it was, extremely difficult it was for them. And I also went on to tell her how wonderful it is. How wonderful it is that she has a mother who loves her so much that she would be sitting on the side of the road just desolate about her daughter not being there. Well, after just a little bit, I got ready to go and did, and I think I really was. It really helped her. Her crying had stopped, and she was getting ready, standing up and getting ready to leave as well. And so I was Christ shining light on this young woman. And I found it so ironic that here I was, this 70-year-old dude, dressed like this, with my sticks. My hair was a lot longer then. I had my funky hat on. I didn't speak a word of Spanish, and I'm the one that stops to console her. Remarkable. At any rate, it was quite the experience. So, okay, I'm running way late. So I think I'll probably just finish up with this story. There's another tradition on the Camino, and that is to carry a stone with you. And that, you think when you're trying to get rid of every half ounce, carrying a stone with you, but it's a burden. It represents a true physical burden because you're carrying extra weight, but it's also an emotional burden that you're carrying. And the idea is you carry it for a period of time, and then if you're doing the Camino Frances, you get to this spot called the Cruz Ferro, the Iron Cross. It's sort of near the top of a hill, and it's got gazillions of stones around it, and they have to actually take them off every so often, and then it gets piled right back up, where you lay down your burden, your stone. You say a prayer and lay down whatever it is that is burdening you, and that's very traditional. In my first Camino, that's exactly what I did, and it tends to be a very cathartic experience. It's really quite beautiful. Well, this trip, my burden was carrying some of Father Thomas's ashes. And so I would be laying those down in little bits as I was going. And I was also bearing the grief of my father's having recently passed. So it was a multifaceted part of the experience for me. So when I would talk to people about it, that is one of the conversations that sometimes comes up, well, what burden are you carrying? And I would say this, and I had my spiritual directors, some of his ashes, and they go, oh my gosh, so how do you know where you're going to put them? And well, that's extremely clear. The Holy Spirit will reach out and touch me every place I'm supposed to be placing these ashes. And I will tell you that that's exactly what happened every single time. Probably about nine different places along the course of the Camino, I was called to do that. Ending at the very last one, this one I knew I was going to do, which was in the ocean, the last bit in the ocean, beach at Finisterre. And that would lead to some amazing conversations. Not surprisingly, that's what Camino does. But about, well, what's this Holy Spirit? Tell me about what that is. And then that, once again, it's this incredible jumping in spot to have conversations that really have some real serious, real gravitas to them. And that is a wonderful thing for me. I really love that. And we talk about that as another vehicle for inviting, I've got written here, inviting people into God's kingdom. And that was not particularly an expectation of mine, but blessed opportunity that would arise. So there are many, many different stories about divine appointments. I've just touched on a very few. I've got lots and lots more. But, the Camino is a lot of humbling experiences. It's a lot of gorgeous sunrises and watching sunsets, meditation, prayer, time with God, answering prayers, and times of being an answer to other people's prayers. There is a quote that from Father Walter Chiswick that written this book called He Leadeth Me a number of years ago. And the quote goes, you do not need to find God's will in this moment and these circumstances, because this moment and these circumstances are God's will for you. The simple secret is you can trust God. This is a man who was a missionary that ended up in the Gulag for 15 years, and a whole long story to it, but after World War II. And it's a very profound concept, and I think that it is applicable to the Camino experience. So the Camino is many things for many people. For me, it's a vision for life. It's faith, rhythm, pace, harmony, connecting with other pilgrims throughout the ages, and sharing life-giving Christ with others and with me. It's useful to look back occasionally at what's happened and where we've been. Otherwise, we miss the sunrises. We cannot see how far we've come versus only focusing on how far we have to go. And we miss the immersion in and the joy of Christ's presence. So I am incredibly grateful that God called me, has been calling me to do these, guiding me and directing me on the Camino. Will I do it again? I absolutely hope so. Would I commend it to you? Absolutely, without hesitation. Thank you, and blessings to each of you.
So we have these questions at the table that Ben and Mike put together. I think if we could spend